Hey guys, welcome back to Games of War. Today's episode is the game that forced you to switch consoles. And I don't mean that literally. I'm sure a game never held you at gunpoint and forced you to switch. But this is more of a setup for a discussion. In my personal life, back in the day, I had one console. I had a Sega Genesis. I was always a Sega kid growing up. And partly because my parents weren't eager to drop another $200-300 on another console and games. So I had one system and I was completely happy with that and content. And even when the Super Nintendo first launched in '91, I was still happy that I had a Sega Genesis. I didn't ask for a Super Nintendo right away, and it didn't bother me. And a lot of my friends got the Super Nintendo, and I played Mario, and I played F-Zero, and I played some of the other big, name profile release games, and I thought it was cool. I really enjoyed it, but I preferred my Sega. And it wasn't until a buddy of mine rented a certain game, and I came over for the weekend, and when I played this game, all of that went out the window. This is a game that forced me to start bugging my parents for a Super Nintendo. That game is none other than Actraiser. Now, where do I start with Actraiser? I had a religious experience with this game. This is one of my favorite games of all time, bar none, any console. And what made this game so special was not the graphics, because it's a good-looking game, but it's nothing that couldn't be done on the Genesis, in my opinion, save for a few colors and the Mode 7 effects. When you go down into the towns, it kind of does a 3D effect and scales down. The music is pretty much a step above anything on the Genesis. Yuzo Koshiro does a masterpiece soundtrack. Everybody talks about Streets of Rage, with the Yuzo Koshiro, but in my opinion, Actraiser is where it's at. This game just totally hooked me from the time I started playing until I finished it that very weekend. One of the most original, just fun games to play. It made the Super Nintendo, I looked at it in a whole new light. I must have this console is what registered through my brain after playing Actraiser and finishing. I didn't even care that I finished it in that weekend. I just wanted to own this game, own a Super Nintendo, and be able to play it whenever I wanted. It's a side-scrolling action game mixed with some God elements. And you play as, very simply known as the Master. There was an evil deity named Tanzra, who she had some chief lieutenants, I think 6 bosses in all, maybe 8, I can't remember. But I remember that you start off and you fight side-scrolling stages, and after you clear the monsters out, you are able to go into this lifeless town whose people have lost faith in you. And as you are in this town, it's a top-down view, you play as an angel, and you fly around and you fight monsters, but that's not the sole purpose. There are kind of spawn points where monsters will spawn from, and they will kind of try to ravage the land as you rebuild it. They'll, kidnap people and pull them out of the house and fly away. They'll destroy houses. But what you do is rebuild the roads, you rebuild the houses, you do tasks for these villagers. They're going to find things and present offerings to you, and you're going to learn new abilities. You're going to build houses, you're going to use your powers of nature, like lightning, to destroy trees so you can build a clear path through the town. You're going to learn the art of growing crops to give people food. It's just an amazing experience, combined with side-scrolling hack and slash stages and great boss battles, excellent music. Those all come together to form just such a unique game. Actraiser is still in my top 10 games of all time. Every element comes together so beautifully in this game, and I cannot praise this enough. I'd never played anything like it back then, and still to this day, there's really nothing quite like Actraiser. The way you do this simulation mode in this game, and rebuilding these towns, going from town to town, each town inflicted with something, a new type of sickness, or something's wrong with the people, or you get into these different towns, and there's a different situation at hand for each town. There's different objectives in each town, and it's just so much fun to watch the people, rebuild the city, following your orders, giving praise to you. That after you finish building this town and everything is beautiful, then you go in and finally kill the final boss and seal away evil for good. And you can return to the other lands. You go up in a floating palace and you can kind of view the whole world from up top. And it's just an amazing experience. I can't praise this game enough. This is the game that forced me to start bugging my parents for a Super Nintendo. Actraiser is just a must-own, and it makes the console worth owning, in my opinion. So now that I've talked about Actraiser, you can imagine my excitement when I saw that they were making a second one. And what could be better? The graphics looked better, once again playing as the Master, but when I played the game, it kind of let the air out of my sails, man, because they took out the God elements. Actraiser became just a simple side-scroller hack and slash game, and while I'll never complain about more of a good thing, it just didn't have the magic of the first game. Now the graphics looked better, and there was some new moves, and there was great art design. Once again, great music. It just really felt like the game was missing something without the god simulation elements. It really took it out of the sequel for me. I still like the game very much, and it's very challenging, and it's a very good-looking game, very great sounding game, and it's fun to play. It just doesn't have the magic of the first Actraiser, so that was kind of a letdown for me. So when Actraiser 2 didn't really set my world on fire the way the first one did, I wouldn't have to wait long to be forced to make the Super Nintendo my #1 focus at the time. As soon as Soul Blazer was released, I was drawn back onto the Super Nintendo side of things. And what an amazing game, done by the same guys that did Actraiser. It's very similar in certain ways to Actraiser, but different at the same time. Once again, the graphics aren't like overly amazing, but it does look good. The music sounds great. I think it even shares some sound effects from Actraiser, which kind of gave it like an Actraiser-ish vibe. I know I had a smile on my face the whole time playing this game. What makes this game so unique is that it's kind of a dungeon crawler, kind of top-down, but not really. You go into these dungeons, and as you kill these enemies that are spawning from these spawn points, each time you take out enemies and eliminate the spawn point, you make something in this village reappear. It could be a talking flower, it could be a dog, it could be people, it could be a house or a building. And when you get back into town and you talk to these people or animals, there's lots of talking animals, they kind of fill you in on the story and how they have been sealed away for so long, and they tell you past stories of what happened in this town and how they are in this state. So it's kind of unraveling this huge story as you defeat these enemies and making things reappear, and it's always really exciting to get back into the town after a long journey in the dungeon and talk to all these things that you have freed and all these souls you have freed, and listen to them tie together the story and have different subplots as you get back into town. They might send you on a different quest that kind of completes this story arc. That it all intertwines into this wonderfully told story, and it's very addicting to play this game. Once you start going to these dungeons and unlocking souls and building this town back up, it's very hard to stop playing. Once again, I finished this game very quick, and I'm the kind of gamer that chips away at games a little bit over time, but with this one, more so when I was younger, I played a lot more. I had more patience and just more time in general. I'm sure that's like that with everybody. But Soul Blazer is one of the rare instances where I just could not stop playing this game until I finished it. Very much like Actraiser, it's just got that certain something about it. It's just very unique. It's an experience all in itself, and it is a wonderful game on the Super Nintendo. In my opinion, Actraiser and Soul Blazer are worth owning the console for, just if you had those two games. They are that good. Soul Blazer is a game that forced me to switch consoles, if only for just a little bit. An amazing game. Axelay is a game that kind of forced me to switch over to the Super Nintendo for a short period of time, but for very different reasons than the Soul Blazer and Actraiser style of games. This is a shooter, so shooters aren't going to be known for their intricate storylines and dungeon crawling or town building. But this game really changed the way I looked at shooters at the time. I had played so many shooters in the Genesis. The console is known for its shmups and shoot 'em ups, but the Super Nintendo not so much. But Axelay really used the Super Nintendo, the Mode 7 effects and the different graphical effects that it could produce. And it has like a really cool scrolling effect where it looks like the world is turning like on an axis. The backgrounds are kind of almost like they're pasted on, but it's very impressive to see in motion. A great graphical style. It combines top-down and side-scrolling shoot-'em-up stages, excellent music and graphics. Something about this game, I know it got really great reviews at the time, so that had me interested, but when I actually saw like the stages and saw these like different effects, I was hooked, man, and I played this shooter over and over again, and it really kind of changed the game as far as shooters in Super Nintendo with myself and my interest, because I really was hooked on Axelay. I thought it brought a lot of really cool new elements to the table in terms of shooters, and it showed me just what the Super Nintendo was capable of in terms of graphics and having enemies on screen, a great power-up system, excellent music and stage variety. This was a shooter that really changed my opinion of the Super Nintendo. Shadowrun on the Super Nintendo is one of my absolute favorite games of all time, and another one of those kind of game changers for me in terms of Sega and Nintendo. Now you play as Jake Armitage, and Shadowrun is kind of a long-running, from what I understand, like tabletop RPG. I knew nothing of any of that. I just looked at the game and I thought it looked really interesting to me. I was kind of into the whole futuristic, sci-fi, Blade Runner style theme. And in this game you play as Jake and you wake up and you are actually like dead. You are killed by a couple of assassins and you wake up in the morgue. And what starts there is a cross between like an action game, kind of three-quarter view, and almost like a point and click. and I just became fascinated with this game, unraveling the story and figuring out your identity and what happened to you and why you were killed. The gunplay isn't the best, and the systems at work aren't exactly the best, but such an addictive adventure going from these different futuristic sci-fi locations and these crime bosses and this huge mystery that unfolds. I can't really put into words why this game is just so much more amazing than the Genesis version, in my opinion. I don't know if it's because I played this one first, but I really enjoy Shadowrun. Once again, a religious experience, if you will. But this game is completely amazing, and if you have any interest in Shadowrun in the world, I definitely recommend playing this Super Nintendo version. Everything comes together in this, the futuristic, kind of gritty storytelling, the gameplay, hacking into the Matrix. I mean, this was all like really futuristic thinking stuff, and it's a very unique game and one that I completely recommend on the Super Nintendo. Definitely check out Shadowrun. It's definitely one of my favorite Super Nintendo games of all time, and one that completely forced me to switch consoles. Hope you guys have enjoyed this video. The Super Nintendo is a fantastic system, and I've really come to appreciate it over the years. The Genesis will always be number one in my book. It's just my opinion, but I love the Super Nintendo very dearly. It's a very close second. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you for watching. As always, Games of War is nothing without you.